Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Municipal Accommodation Tax ad hoc committee. We will start with an acknowledgement followed by a respect and Stratford statement. We acknowledge that Stratford is situated on lands shared between many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples today. As a city, we have a responsibility for the stewardship of the land on which we live and work. Today, we acknowledge the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and the neutral Atamandra peoples, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live, work, and play on this land. Respect in Stratford. The Corporation of the City of Stratford is committed to providing quality service to all members of the public, council, and our employees. Our goal is to promote a safe, healthy, respectful, inclusive, and positive environment. We have a responsibility to treat people with respect by creating safe and respectful spaces. It is the city's expectation that all present will be respectful. Item 2, we have declaration of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Seeing none. Item 3 is adoption of minutes from our last meeting. So I would look for somebody to move the minutes from the April 7th meeting. Only have those voices. Okay. And we don't need to set it. Okay. Any additions, corrections? All in favor? That carries. Item 4 is adoption of the addenda or addenda. We don't have any. Item 5 is items for discussion. We have the survey results back. And they were in the package for all of us to review. As I had a look at them, wasn't too surprised at the results. Looks like pretty strong support for the direction that we're going with this policy to support overnight stays. And that was definitely the most supported at the very first questions. The second supported question was the policy adopted should provide some flexibility to council, also the strongest level of support. I noticed that there were a lot of suggestions, mainly by people who are strictly residents in the city, that they would like the city to use it for things like road maintenance and things that overlap that local tourists and residents use. But I think we probably discussed it at this meeting that for the amount that it is and the level of service and so on we already provide the city, doesn't really make a lot of sense to go in that direction. So I think unless there's any other further question, anybody have any comments or thoughts on the survey?
I do. So this survey was really in response to Councillor McCabe's resolution of December the 8th, which very clearly says structured consultation with broader tourism sector, yada yada, including but not limited to accommodators, food and beverage operators, and so on. It's very clear in this that the opinions of residents are, I won't say not to be considered, but not the focus. So is there a way in the data to pull the responses that fall under those categories and to be able to see it kind of skewed that way?
Can I build on that point? Just to say that if you look at the numbers in the sample size, you've got about 63% residents, 24% accommodators, and 20% business. So 60-20-20. I think Jennifer's spot on that 63% of the respondents aren't addressing Councillor McCabe's question. And so there should be a way to segment the database to at least, emphasize that it's really small again. But since over 60% of the database is driven by residents right now, they have a disproportionately loud voice. They would at least be informative to present side by side with and without residents.
So question for the technical people amongst us. Yeah, maybe Barney?
I'm not sure the answer, I don't, I'm not as sure, so we can take that back and see if there's a way to filter it, if not, then certainly we can qualitatively speak to that skew when we present the information back to council. I think that seems reasonable, right?
Because the concern is that then we haven't really satisfied what that resolution was. And I just don't, I think it's very clear we need to get this wrapped up. So I don't want to have to come back in 2 months because that hadn't been addressed adequately.
Typically, I obviously don't know this particular system, but typically it's just based on Excel database. And sort by different responses, so I hope that's the case here.
I would think so, and then, as I said, you know, it feels to me when I read the responses that I can kind of tell. But, you know, I think 60% of it are people in the public who have a different viewpoint. About the map tax, so. Yeah, if we can provide that data broken down, we will, again, sample sizes. Small.
I have asked our team and whether that's possible, so I'll shoot that back.
Okay, it's great.
So how will we hear back on?
I will hear back as soon as I hear back from my IT person, hopefully during this meeting.
Great.
Do we need to make a motion?
It's already done, I think that's the way raised.
Okay.
Great, yeah, and we don't, there's no motion necessary here, I don't think, to accept this certain things, just for our review.
Yeah.
At this point,
I agree with your overarching critical. I just think it's going to get more extreme in terms of which answers definitely agree versus disagree from the segment.
but I do think. It's very positive that overall the survey is very heavily supportive of overnight space. As a big focus, so I think we can take that as a big.
There were two comments in the reviews. One was from a respondent that you said that they didn't really understand what act was and how it worked. I just wonder if you said, I wonder if that's going to be more broadly based and is there any kind of educational expense, but just education?
Something on our website.
Yeah.
Saying this is what it is, this is.
Representations.
We do have that, we have quite an extensive map page, but again, we don't really go and do a lot of push on that, except for the people who are involved with it, right? So, is there a way to?
The reason I brought it up is you're asking that person their opinion and don't know what it is.
Hopefully they can take them.
They probably learned it, right, during the survey. The second one that struck me, and I just wanted to get self-disclosed, it was not me that ranted about the 30-year veteran marker, it was not me who said that. So I don't want to be excused from.
I just want to circle back around to John's first point. I think when tourism was moved away from the city, and gosh, what year is that? I can't even remember. From that first report, there was commentary on having the citizens understand tourism. And I think here we are decades later and we're still seeing this. It's clear in the responses that a lot of people have no idea what the mat is or how much it is. I think some people think it's bringing in millions and millions of dollars, or they don't understand how expensive it is to fix roads. So I won't say that is solely, I think part of that is on the city, part of it is also on the organizations. That support tourism in the city, because this is a refrain that's heard time and time again, is residents don't understand tourism, they don't see the value in it. And this, to me, some of the comments in here are yet another example of that, and it's frankly a little disappointing that we're decades later and we're no further ahead. In tourism's relationship with a lot of the residents.
I would agree with your comments, and I do think that there's always that gap of people who just go with their assumptions. I mean, and it's the same with with people thinking we can just fill every pothole in the city, and it's not gonna cost us very much money, like it's, you know. So education is always it's always a good thing. Get people understanding the impact of tourism, then they start to appreciate a little more exactly the economic benefit to our city. Sure. Okay, so if there's no more comments on that, we'll move on to 5.2, which is draft policy, June 29th. That's the name. So we have some tracked changes in there based on our last conversation. So perhaps we can just go through it in order.
I'll start off by saying too, like, there was a lot of conversation and not necessarily a lot of specific direction or conclusion. So if I've missed anything, it's not on purpose. It's not to exclude anyone's comments or anything else. It's just trying to capture it all after the fact was a little bit of a challenge. So appreciate your patience and understanding. So I'll start and then please jump in if you feel strongly one way or another or have other things that I've missed. Okay, so there was a comment in some track changes, I think, John, that you had provided. So some of my comments are in that context with respect to there being a connection between the policy and the scorecard or the scoring mechanism. So I tried to benefit or tried to make the enhancement in that particular first comment in the benefit to tourism section of the criteria page. So we can maybe hop to that. I've got it as page 41 of the package and tried to highlight the change benefit to tourism industry there. Is that you guys follow over in that?
I thought that part was great.
Okay, good. Okay, again, I'm just trying to, if there's something I've misunderstood or misinterpreted, please feel where I need to go. Okay, so then the purpose really is really, there was a comment as well about the connection to Destination Stratford's goals and objectives. This is really not intended to comment on that explicitly, so I haven't really made up a lot of the distinction other than to say that it is for the municipal portion.
What page?
Just the first page, the purpose part. So my comments were that I thought as tracked changes. So there's a few, I've tried to enhance the language wherever possible. And hopefully that resolves any kind of discomfort that there was inconsistencies, so. And again, same with the last one there. So the fundamental goals of the policy, again, we're trying to align them with supporting tourism and the city's position on that, not necessarily what Destination Stratford is explicitly doing. I mean, ideally we work together and ideally they complement each other, but we don't want to have them so intertwined that they're interdependent. So that's the next comment I have is on the visitor section. This one I actually was not totally clear on when I started doing this, but so I added a second definition there as an overnight visitor to distinguish it between a visitor. I think that might resolve it, but I'm open to suggestions on this one. Anybody have any comments or concerns? So we're throughout where we were previously talking about a visitor being 40 kilometers and the conversation that we want overnight guests to be coming from farther away because they're often the ones who are going to stay overnight. Where I've sort of tried to capture that throughout the policy and the criteria that were really targeting overnight visitor.
That was,
Okay.
more so than the distance, the measurement of the distance, the kilometers, the behavior, I think is what.
That's ideal, sure, but I think it's just
Are you gonna
trying to
measure?
get, well, and when we're targeting, or groups are trying to access this funding, they can use that as a bit of a benchmark, because they know where they're gonna be marketing their event, or where they're gonna be advertising that.
I'm just looking, does anyone offhand know the distance to like Kitchener or London? Because I feel like those catchments should be included.
So I think that the London one's probably closer to the 100, but I think they're probably all under 100 if I.
Oh, yes, 47 kilometers.
Yeah. Is that so are you suggesting that we
So wouldn't that visit, an overnight visitor be a subset of visitor?
Yes,
So can you just make an overnight visitor a visitor who stays overnight?
yeah. You can, but I think the comment was is that 40 kilometers isn't far enough to capture overnight visitors. I think when we were talking about it last time, which is why I tried to throw, and 100 kilometers came up. So
Yeah, I think
But-
the hard thing is like we have so many staycation people
Yeah.
and it's really, it's hard to put a distance.
we can remove the 100-kilometer reference in the overnight.
You've already got more than
Yeah.
40,
Okay,
right? So.
sure.
This is how to quantify it,
Yeah.
and when you're applying.
Well, I think
How
that
would
goes
you-
back to Carmen's point, though, that the pitch, hey, we're gonna be marketing kitchen and water, well fed,
Right.
One.
Okay, no, that's fair, thanks. Okay, that's okay. Okay, so roles and responsibilities, so I heard this group and I've heard it through the duration of this. That the intent or the desire is to maybe establish a permanent committee to do the evaluations. But what I'm proposing or what I'm suggesting is that that's not really necessarily the policy piece of that. That's more the, I'll say call it like this is the governance piece. How council chooses to administer the policy or how they would want to do that. I'm suggesting would be part of the commentary in the report that goes to council. Where they would be provided options on how to administer it. So whether it's a permanent ad hoc committee or a permanent evaluation committee, or whether it's everything comes to council, or whether it's administered by staff. So again, that was my intent here, but let's discuss.
So I think you're right. I think this topic has come up in every meeting. In some one way or another. And I would like to discuss a little bit further where it's not going to be part of the proposal, where that decision gets made. Who's the decision making body for that?
Again, not me, but at the same time, when we develop policies, the policy piece is supposed to be the governance piece that is council retains and establishes. If they would choose to, like, say, for example, they might want the adjudication to happen by another third party. I don't know if it's like, say, like, I don't know, just gonna make up places, but like the foundation, like the community foundation, or some third party that's unrelated to anybody in this process. They could choose to do that, and that wouldn't necessarily change anything about policy. So I'm trying to make sure that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater if there's one thing about that. So part of the direction when a report comes forward with council is to accept the drafted policy. And then there's other considerations. So we'll say, like, for example, we want to mention the survey. If the survey results need some massaging, then we would want to mention that. How the policy gets administered, we'll be looking for direction on that, but not necessarily making that assumption when we present them with a draft policy that was the outcome.
My sense is, unfortunately, we don't have everybody here, but my sense is there was pretty good alignment around the desire for a standing committee. Very similar, not necessarily the same people, but similar roles and backgrounds. And so I'd like to understand what we need to do to get that recommendation included.
It will be included, it will be included in the report.
I'll let you interrupt me.
That's right.
I would like it to be part of the formal policy. Yes.
Okay.
So just a thought on that. Yeah, you wouldn't want to jeopardize the policy for the procedure, but we can do it, and it is at council's discretion to, of course, go through and.
Is this entire thing at council's discretion?
Yes, yeah, but there's sort of. There's the policy is like, this is how the direction we want to go on house and then there's procedure, like how that will be accomplished. That kind of we tend to separate too, but
I guess
it's not impossible,
Sorry, I guess my thought is how money gets spent is gonna depend on who's influencing and evaluating the agenda. I don't know how you can separate those two.
Well, the policy itself is going to give a whole lot of direction on how to do it, right? Like there's going to be a structure there. So no matter who's sitting at that table, they're going to be deciding based on the criteria that we set out that, prioritizes over the next day. So in some ways, in theory, if the policy is followed, it shouldn't matter who's sitting at the table, decisions.
Yes, so then it shouldn't matter if we include it. So I have to make a motion for that to happen?
You, sure, I mean,
All right.
like, again, we don't have to do that, I can build it however this committee would like, if that's what you would like to see it in there. I think I just wanted to make sure that this policy had the most chance of success at its first crack, and not having to have council sort of go through and say, well, we don't like this, we do like that, and you know, kind of as little as possible. But
Don't they do
again,
that anyhow? Don't they do that anyhow?
maybe,
Yeah, so anyway, since it's come up repeatedly, I haven't heard any of my peers here. React to it. Isn't there basically a line in veto in council where they say we're gonna pass all this except for paragraph 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if they don't like it, they can take it as it is 20-1.
I think my thing about not being clear in us. And I speak for myself, but I also speak sort of for the innkeepers whose opinion I know. My concern is if we don't make it clear in black and white that this is how we feel it should be administered, it won't be. And already we're talking about half of the half, you know, half of the half is controlled by council. And then, you know, I hate to say it, but there's not a lot of goodwill right now in how council will behave surrounding this. You know, so I would rather see it in black and white and have them take the action of vetoing it and saying to everybody around that we see what your recommendation is and what you want, and we're gonna say no. Because I think that in itself is a very different thing than a recommendation. This is what we are saying we believe the right thing is to do, and it's a lot harder for them to say no to that and keep any kind of public visual.
through the chair, so again, I have no real big issues with including it in the policy, so. I just need a little bit more feedback from you as to what you envision that standing committee composition and like overall responsibility to look like. If it's the same as this ad hoc, then that's easy enough, but if it's not, or there's some other establishment process that you would want to see as a group, like just let me know.
Sure. I think that the language that was used to create the ad hoc was pretty well articulated.
Okay.
So as much as it can be just pasted,
And if I may, through the chair, to comment on your other concern. I just. Again, I'm trying to make this be a bit of a happy, maybe an unhappy medium in terms of the allocation of the funds. But if this committee wants to include 100% of the funds in the proposed policy, we can do that. Like, it was kind of just, it was a little bit of interpretation on my part, and if I've overstepped, I do apologize, but that's to try to make sure that we can come up with something that will be palatable to somewhat palatable to both the committee and so. But again, I don't have any concerns. I can flip it back to being 100% of funds raised from Map Collective, if that's the wish of this group.
it is.
Or it would be,
One person.
I was gonna say, you could consider a different proportion, like rather than 50-50, you know.
Well, I think Niagara had like 20% allotted, which sounds the way the wording, that sounds like it's controlled by the city, go to infrastructure. Particular focus on tourism initiatives, but the other 80%. That was broken into major and minor,
But I think there's already enough latitude to say. That there are some infrastructure things that can be justified as real tourism spaces, right? I think signage and waymaking, what is the expression was, wayfinding, right? And I don't have a problem with that. The problem I have is on page 28 where it says, once the money goes into the trust fund, the reserve fund, it basically becomes a slush fund and council can spend it however they like. I think that language, I love the idea of reserve. That we keep some money aside for bigger events or disaster planning, whatever. But I think when it comes back out again, it gets spent, it should still be applicable, the same rule should still be applicable.
Am I correct in saying that, so we had tours of the product defined, and that we said that the portion that would be the council reserve fund portion would have to still fall under the definitions given in tourism product?
I think so. I think I did capture that.
So there is sort of a type thing, like you can't just really do a sidewalks thing.
Can I
It
read-
has to go on, forget, I don't have the same, it's the third page you can wrong document, it has.
Can I read relevant quote to you? It's on PDF page 29. The requirement of council initiatives, provincial legislation under Ontario rights, blah, 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 remains. But future disbursements of any unallocated initiatives may or may not be directed towards this policy at council's discretion.
Correct.
So that says that they can spend it on.
No, it says that they have to comply with the provincial legislation, which requires them to be spending it on tourist related initiatives.
That may or may not.
Because again, like this particular policy has a lot of very specific directives. The legislation was less specific. So the intent with that paragraph, again, it's new, and I was trying to wordsmith it, so I'm happy to take direction back from this committee. To provide that council still has to comply with the provincial legislation, but it make whatever they choose. So for example, let's say they wanna, I don't know, use whatever the portion is, forget if it's 50-50 or 80-20, whatever, but if the portion that's unallocated, then they want to direct it to something that's wayfinding signs that's not creating an overnight stay and whatever, then they legally are allowed to do that, but by this policy, it doesn't fit.
So I'm just wondering why we have to have the may or may not be directed towards this policy, why can't it be required is to follow the Ontario regs when you're spending the reserve.
We can't, again, I was trying to be a little bit more explicit so that it was clear for this committee, but we can take that later.
Yeah, that's, yeah, I'm not so much caught up on that as I am some of the other.
So if you want to go back to the percentage.
I don't have to see a need to do that. Anybody else thinks?
And we can propose something different. So that, you know, I mean, in my mind, it makes sense to do even a 75-25, or I don't know, 50-50. But I think it would help this program to have some initiatives that we can have like a council decision around. So there's a fund, call it a slush fund or whatever. It's a fund that can be used for tourism related activities that council sees are appropriate.
Or a standing committee, which one?
Yeah, and the other thought that I had was, let's just say we split it 2/3, 1/3, 2/3 going towards this policy program. And 1/3 going towards council. But in a given year, let's say we raise $300,000 from doing this for easy math. So 200,000 would go towards this grant program, and 100,000 would go towards the reserve fund. If there were not sufficient applications in the program to make it up to 200,000, that we have provision that would say any additional funds that are applied for would then go to the reserve fund. I
did say that, but I think that there was maybe an objection to that, because it became then within council's control as opposed to the committee's control.
And my other question is, as far as the percentages go, are we basing it on what we know to be the income for the last calendar year?
That's where essentially the income for the last several calendar years has been fairly consistent. It's been around 300,000 a year for the city's portion. But of that, council has directed of that more about 50% of it to initiatives that have come up with that. So that's why that, again, not trying to prejudge the council or prejudge the committee, but if council wants to continue to support certain initiatives that they have in the past with MAT funds, 20% is not going to allow them to do that, but 50% would. That said, this will be a discussion item, obviously, whatever number we go forward with.
Right, but that initiative,
or a initiative who's received funding in the past could apply to this.
Right, could apply to this.
Yeah.
Or could just apply straight to council from their controlled funds.
Right, but the council didn't have the full.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's true, that's true.
So I have now two concerns based on this conversation. One is that when the money goes in, when it comes back out again, it needs to be, it sounds like we even that one down and come up with language that will work. But that the spending of that fund should also go through the standing committee.
So. The spending of the council portion, you mean?
It's not the council portion, it's a
Well, it's all
reserve.
portion, really, but. I mean,
Are we not calling it the reserve fund?
sure, which is
Okay.
all council portion.
So do you want to argue whether it's council's money or do you want to talk about the reserve fund?
Whatever the same. I'm not, I don't need to argue, I'm just suggesting that the reserve fund is within council's control.
The whole thing is within council's control, but I believe council has asked for this group's opinion on how that should be structured, so that's why we're here. So can we talk about the reserve fund?
So the reserve fund is not what's up for debate here. The reserve fund is the parking lot for the funds. The funds themselves that are raised, if it's 300,000 in a year, for example, whatever the percentage is that is allocated towards this policy would not necessarily be. It wouldn't become part of that reserve fund necessarily.
So the money that's already in the reserve fund would be beyond this policy already, it's already landed in the reserve.
Again, up to council's discretion, but like. Not, I don't know that I've explicitly addressed existing balances in the policy.
I'm confused because we've had conversations in which we said. We may want to spend the math on a bunch of small activities this year.
Yep.
Or we may want to save up our rubles and do a big gangbusters thing in 3 years' time. Right, that's the fund I'm talking about. This ain't-
It is capturing that, John, so let me look through the policy again and I'll make sure that that gets captured.
I,
So unspent, so again, so
could I
unspent.
just finish,
Yes,
please?
of course.
I don't believe that there's ever been discussion about taking that fund and putting it into a designated council. There's been discussion about taking MAT funds and putting it into the savings account for further bigger MAT spending in the future. But I've never heard and never supported a discretionary council fund being skimmed off the top.
And then I'm just curious about. Again, the percentages we come up with, but. It's sort of a moving target. We want to have. To have the policy say that this is the amount based on that, like, let's say 2026 or 2027. You know, that the amount was 300,000, therefore, this is the percentage and it's a locked in number.
You just say 50% of the prior year's table to be.
Right.
To exceed.
And that, so that money can come out of.
So there's been 3 years worth of prior years.
Mhm.
So. Again, I'm just like, we can make the policy effective, whatever date of adoption. And have it apply to existing balances that are in the reserve fund or not. Like, I'm indifferent about what that is, but, just for so just if I can clarify, when you were talking about the big project, small project thing. So the intent then of the committee would be that if we say you have $200,000 this year, no applications, nobody comes forward, or none that we like.
No, that's past the criteria.
So then next year, get another 200, so then we would have 400, is that the intent for this ad hoc committee? Because that's not how I originally have structured this, and I'm happy to make the change. So then that to it's kind of a rolling accumulation.
That suddenly gets drawn down when regular voters comes to town.
Sure. Or doesn't, and then at what point does it come back up for council discussion or like reallocation? let's say, I'm just gonna make up an extreme example, but let's say that we have no applications for 5 years, now we've got $1 million in there.
I've heard it said that it's council money, so if they want to take it out at some
It
point.
is, but I'm trying to structure this so that it doesn't end up being like create conflict, that's all.
I'm trying to structure it so that it's transparent.
Is
So
it
that it's-
possible to create to user funds?
No,
Just curious.
no,
I think it should say that whatever percentage, I don't really care the percentage, it may end up coming out to the same thing anyhow. You collect 50% goes to Destination Stratford, we get 50%, 50% of that, so we now down to 25 cents on the dollar. Gets put in the savings account to be spent on map initiatives as it accumulates. The other 25 cents is for smaller projects that you want to fund this year. It keeps building up. Anytime the council wishes to make a withdrawal, that's at council's discretion. But it is defined to be in compliance with the regulation that you cite.
well, and I guess like I don't know how that's different necessarily than how it has been operating. Because all of the decisions that have been made and all of the deposits or accumulations and then subsequent withdrawals, for lack of a better word, have been fully transparent on the website and been passed by council resolution for allocating those funds. So if there's something more or like somehow that's not transparent enough, like I'm happy to try to figure out how to make it.
Yeah, I think the piece that's missing is the standing committee that's going to evaluate the different ideas and make a recommendation to council. Representing, the different folks that you asked to make up that were asked to make up the committee.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that council necessarily would have the view of a large accommodator, small accommodator, concerned citizen. I'm not sure that all of those different agendas would be made clear to council or transparent to council, or the reasoning why council makes certain decisions isn't necessarily transparent to all of us. So that's what I'm on the transparency.
That's up to council to have a discussion
For sure.
at an open meeting to say why it is that we want to fund whatever it is.
All that we've been asked for is our advice, and we're trying to get that.
Yeah, that's great.
If you don't want to follow our advice, let's make that discussion. Or don't ask us in the first place.
So back to the percentages, are we going to leave it at the costing 50 split of the 50%?
With the,
Leave it like that, or would you prefer an adjustment to that? And leave it out to there's thoughts on that.
I think, I mean, there's very little money. And I think to entrust this committee to make good recommendations to council, and ultimately council is the one that says yay or nay. So I don't like the idea of council getting its own little piece of this, because that puts us right kind of where we are today, where money's being spent that is not going to regenerate this fund. So I think council, the city, the residents, the industry needs to respect that the input of professionals and some members at large, other business members, whatever, are going to give the best advice on how this money can be spent and how this money will best go to regenerate this fund.
it's just a more informed set of
It's more
information.
important, and again, in the end, I know that council can do what they want, that's abundant. But they cannot do it without explanation and saying to this industry, we've heard what you said and we don't want to do it that way. I think these are very clear messages, whether it's the formation of a group or the handling of the money, these are very clear messages to this industry that we need to hear.
Or hear council striking down the elements of it and the explanation for doing it. Because that'll be really interesting to various populations to see what happens.
So did you have a recommendation of changing the percentages?
I think it should all go to this policy.
Do you agree that around 50% goes to destination Stratford?
Well, it has to, 50% has to by law.
That's
It has to go
the Ontario legislation.
to an entity, doesn't have to be destination Stratford, but it has to meet certain criteria. But the other 50%, again, it's not a lot of money, can come back. And yeah, I don't wanna make this any more complicated.
My point is just that the 50% of city share or council's share, some of it can be spent now, some of it can be accrued for disposition, disbursement under the supervision of the standing committee, making recommendations to council, non-council having carte blanche from that other 50% savings account. I don't care about destination Stratford, that's just explaining the math of dollars.
I think you're kind of saying the same.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing, and the difference is whether an initiative comes in front of this committee and they say yes, or council say yes, and then it goes back to the committee and it's inefficient that way. If all requests come in through this, and then the recommendations we need to council, and council can say yes or no.
Why did we agree on it? All we're talking about is the percentage.
Well, the time-
Of the percentage.
I think
Yes.
What I'm saying is 100%, so the 50% goes to destination Stratford. The other 50% comes to the, under this policy.
Yes, but all I'm saying is it doesn't have to all be spent in 1 year.
No,
That-
I don't think that would be indication.
Sure.
Well, yeah, so I think that's, that whatever stops that, let's say you don't have the initiatives there, then the residual, the extra amount would then go to the person.
For disbursement under the standing committee, not the council.
Yeah, that, I don't know.
Well, let's figure that out. If the city's portion that goes through the standing committee can't spend it all. Whatever's left and meet the criteria that we've set out, you can see that happening. Then it goes into a savings account and rolls over to the next year to fund the rest of the bigger events.
And at some point, as we were just talking about, like, what if there aren't enough events and then we end up with money that could be spent on.
I don't feel that'll ever be an issue, like with higher levels of government pulling back grants. I think if anything, as we have seen, if anything, it's we're gonna get way more applications than we have money.
The policy comes up for review every 5 years, according to the draft. Council can say we don't want to do that again.
So, through the chair, so I'm just kind of trying to envision how this will work. So let's say we get, first year we get 25 applications and they total $500,000 or something like that in total. And the committee deems that 100,000 of them are legit and to award that. But council thinks that 5 of the others are worthy, but would only have the residual amount left, the 300,000 out of the 300,000 to play with. So in theory, well, you like I just want to walk this through, so I'm not suggesting this will be the case, but if the committee deems them not worthy of spending, but council then does, then we could end up with not having that built up the way that the committee intends. Because council could then award it to. They're still valid legit under the legislation. But, and again, we can probably.
So I think the idea is we're all lucky to outline what we want to have happen. If council wants to do that and ignore the standing committee's recommendations, then one.
Sure,
Let's not,
okay, and that's fair, but.
let's not articulate that as an option that everybody knows exists.
Thank you. That's clear, I thank you, I'll take that back.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've talked about the percentages. Each.
Annual budget, I think, 29, yeah.
So 29 is the one that we had some discussion on already, wasn't it?
Yeah, so excuse me through the chair, so I think what I was doing there, the strikeouts are basically because those definitions got moved just to the definition section and replaced tourism product throughout
Yeah, sorry, I was speaking of the paragraph before that, which read underlined, which I think means you've made some edits to it. The requirement of council decided initiatives, that one,
Oh, sorry, I was past that, my apologies.
I'm always a step behind.
So I did strike some language in there around this council direction or discretion, I mean.
My concern was just the last few words of that paragraph to just.
May or may not be directed from there,
Just spread it.
took it out.
Right.
Okay. So is everybody now that we're under annual budget for real this time? Is everybody okay with that, those proposed changes in that section?
I'm just, it kind of, I think that last sentence, so fund targeting thresholds including, but then all the including things.
Oh,
take
I
that.
did that, yes.
So I don't know how that sentence should then end.
I'll just take out with reserve fund target thresholds, period. I think that
Thresholds, okay,
I think that,
okay.
that's sorry.
Okay.
Yes, we added in as initiatives supporting the promotion of city strategies and destination tourism, as well as those that work towards year-round.
So that's an ad that I suggested based on something I read in one of the survey comments. So it was again, just a suggestion, we can take it out, don't like it.
I have a couple of things and I think they're more clarifying. So I have external applicants are not permitted to apply for map for the same project or in the same calendar year. So just for clarity, is that the same project in the same calendar year? So let's say I have a Butter Tart Festival. And so I applied for 2026. I'm still allowed to apply for 2027 when it comes to it.
Yes, I think
Okay.
it would, yes, but the intent was that you're not able to double dip into the community grant program, nor in the same year.
So I think the or
Oh, okay.
needs to be stricken. So same
Oh.
project in the same calendar
Oh,
year.
yeah, thank you, yeah.
Yeah, or, okay, that's my only note. Following this meet and demonstrate to be funded. Oh, this one I wonder, because the wording, the preamble above the points. Initiative or project must meet and demonstrate, so that indicates that you have to meet each of these. Which, I mean, what kind of stopped me was the sport tourism, so my Butter Tart Festival wouldn't meet that criteria.
I don't know that it was necessarily meant to be exclusive, like, or like, maybe like that they were all mutually exclusive, so maybe I just need to tweak the wording of it.
Yeah, just so it's they need to meet most or
Sure.
some or
Yeah.
whatever, but
Yeah.
the way I read that is I have to meet all those, what are they, 5
Yeah.
criteria?
That's fair.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question, just going back a little bit, for a minute, the annual reporting piece, I don't think there's been much name in it. But is there like a standard template within the city of what that looks like?
Nothing standard, everyone's got their own, like everything we report on has an individualized.
So how do you capture some language that says that it's more than just in, out, balance?
Yeah, but I think it's later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay, it's a little bit later on.
Okay, we'll come back to that.
Let's hold that up.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Thank you. So we're okay with the year-round accommodations piece? Yes or no? And then I struck out. Oh, because I just moved it, so yeah, I just moved that last one in that section to the front one, because I think the intent was to make it more prominent. I think the feeling here was that by having that initiative support from the promotion piece as the last item was not appropriate, so I moved it to the front one.
Yeah.
And then I took out the language around the major events piece, just to kind of, or moved it rather, I also moved that language as well. So we put major events at the end of the segment. So again, if you guys have highlighted or targeted specific things in this section, I'm happy to.
No, I only have one up the top.
Okay, sorry, so. I changed the minimum amount, and this is a competition topic. But 5,000, just from an administrative standpoint, just so we're not getting to the small stuff, because I think the intent, based on the intent we've discussed to generate the 9 days being the primary criteria. But that's not likely to get achieved when you've got such small asks. That was my thought process, but I'm happy to.
I noticed that as well, and somebody made a comment to me that, you know, we disqualify people that want to do small initiatives, but Destination Stratford has
Right.
their own grant program where smaller initiatives like that could be directed there outside of it.
I mean, big.
Yeah.
Consider the eligibility section, I just had a couple minor word edits in there. Took out the meeting, oh yeah, I moved the criteria, but moving the criteria to be above program eligibility because it relates to their major. No, it was just in the language, so it should be in the policies.
I did just, if we're there, are we down to awards? Yeah,
You can be, yeah, that's okay. No one has anything, yep.
yeah, I think this is another just clarifying, so, so for smaller event, you get 50%.
Yeah.
With the major events, you get the full amount at the beginning, that's really not.
That's a good question. I don't know that I've fully thought that one through, but say it's a $50,000 event.
Yeah.
Or $75,000 event. I'm fine to keep that same funding criteria with it, like putting 50% right.
Yeah,
They still should demonstrate, okay. Yeah,
I think that's fair.
And that it won't be like it won't be like 6 months in advance of the event, like that 30-day thing. Right. You didn't have an issue with that, right? Just so that they're.
The skin of the game.
So I think that what this is going to do, what these criteria are going to do is it is going to. Have events that come forward to apply for funding, you're gonna have skin in the game before they get money to get money. So, okay, I just wanna make sure that's clear so that we're not, because I think. What happens sometimes with our community grants is that program. Different from this, but was initially established as kind of like to be the intent of seed funding, but that's not what this is,
Right.
So just wanted to make clear that. Okay.
But it's interesting, wasn't aware that Destination Stratford had a smaller initiative fund, so.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's me, just clarifying again, on page 35, number 5. Eligible organizations can submit only one complete application per year. So that's if I have my Butter Tart Festival in the spring and I have, I don't know, Halloween pop-up in October, I can't apply twice. It's not.
The organization can.
Right.
So, yeah, so that's actually we can talk about this, but are we gonna inadvertently exclude organizations that have multiple events in a year, and is that okay? I kind of think my own feeling on it, against my opinion, is that the organization should not be able to pick which is their priority that they want to seek funding for.
Yeah.
And prioritize it according to the process, but I'm happy to add additional information in there if this group doesn't feel that limiting it to one is appropriate, then.
If that scenario arises, wouldn't they just create another organization? This is a different organization. Different.
Yeah, because they have to be a registered, I don't think they're gonna go and form a formalized business separate, so
I'm not.
but yeah.
Sugar around that too.
Yeah.
There's somewhere in this policy that says that having the event is established.
Yes, no, you get, I think you get more points.
Right, that's
right.
yeah, that's, so it's weighted, so somebody with the new event could still apply, it's just they wouldn't get as much.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
I think I'm okay with the one because I think until this has run a few years and you get the people, you know, hey, if John brings an event to you, we know it's gonna be fantastic, so. So maybe at the 5-year mark, that's opened up, but I think this gives the best job to the most people. At this money, so I'm fine, I think that's.
As folks keep saying, it's not a huge pot of money to begin with, so if we're scarce for submission, that would be a surprise.
Well, and some of the criteria though around the established organizations and that sort of thing may preclude some of the ones that we all have in our minds, because some of them aren't as organized as what, they're not as formally structured, I shouldn't say this, but they aren't as formally structured as what this policy requires. So,
But it could be that they aren't that formally structured yet because they don't have an opportunity to see, make the leap.
yeah.
That would be the hope, right? That we can incubate ideas like that.
Page 36, anybody have anything on the 35, 36? I think you said it's on 37.
And I'm sorry, I the policy review, sorry, that's page 35.
Okay.
I understand that why city staff would be in charge of reviewing this.
Yeah.
I just I think it's important that there be transparency on what they look at to say whether it's a success or not, whether this policy works.
Okay. That's a valid point. I wonder if we can talk about that under the reporting. So, just a second here.
What would be the role of the standing committee in the event of the policy at the 5-year mark?
Board of Departments.
No, that's the receivers.
Right.
Reporting must find about that section in here about the requirements of the city to report.
Yes.
But it's not
Right. Absolutely.
under the director of corporate. Was it under? Okay, yeah, okay, sorry. I asked you to wait, John, when we were talking
Yeah.
before, but I hadn't sort of thought where we were when you brought that up. On page 28 then. So I'm not gonna lose your thoughts, Birmingham, about the policy review, but maybe we tie it to the reporting outcomes. Also. So. Again, we kind of put the policy review as every 5 years, just at a minimum in most of our policies, just to make sure that they don't get. You know, ticking along and have no updates for many years, so, but. The annual reporting, that's under the Director of Corporate Services piece, does that accomplish what you were suggesting?
Sorry, yeah, there was more questions. I didn't know if there was. It's not a P.
Oh, the
you know what I
template,
mean,
right.
info outflow.
Yeah,
Is there any standard template or definition for how to template? And what I mean is, if it just says outflows, that doesn't really break down the fire type festival versus the main serve festival, right? So what I'm wondering about is, what's the right level of detail that had to be done?
sure. Okay, so then again, we can articulate that a little bit more in here.
Sure.
So including the event. Or event name type, whatever.
Yeah, just-
The funds, like again, we can put in as much or as little as possible, but if we're gonna put everything in, we might as well just have it all the applications come in front of council, because all the details will be from the incumbent, so. We have
I'm
to-
imagining if here's the quarterly map income, and here are the 5 initiatives we sponsored that add up to this much.
Yeah.
And here's what we think we've got for each one. How are we doing in terms of hitting our goals?
Okay, so. And so hitting those goals, like then how do we establish whether they did achieve that or not? Like I know that we have the criteria that we've established. And there'll be some post-reporting requirements, but how are we going to quantify or score that piece? I don't know that we talked about that.
That.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because yeah, you're right, there might be enough because the receiver is supposed to provide us with that, and so. In the event that we support these 5 events and they don't report back, for instance, because. That's not what I'm expecting, but that could potentially be a tripping point for
Yes.
event organizers. Yeah. Then we would just comment that if you received or something. And then that may influence the committee's future, giving you money in the future.
So maybe we just, instead of defining what the line items are, say that there's enough information presented to evaluate individual projects.
Okay.
The other thing I wanted to raise in this area of reporting, and I don't know how we've incorporated, so it's just an idea at this stage. At different points in all of our meetings, money being left on the table has come up. And what I mean by that is unlicensed accommodations. And we have a sense, I think, have some pretty good data about unlicensed accommodations, how many they are, which ones they are. I think that the uncaptured revenue should be reported as part of the key.
Through the chair, the city does not have a mechanism to capture that. And it is also outside the scope of a MAT revenue distribution policy. I don't disagree that there's that element is a variable or an influencer here, but I think that. Unless or until the city's in a position to be able to quantify that, I don't know if we can provide it.
Isn't this an opportunity to nudge that along?
Sure, we can certainly do that as part of this, but it's not, I don't think that including anything in this policy that relates to that is going to be productive to this policy.
But you could double the amount of that if it was higher up on waiters.
Well, again, if like there's lots of variables that could influence the amount of math that comes in.
Right.
If we had more hotels, that could, like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like there's all kinds of variables that I think are outside the scope of this specific policy. Broadly, don't disagree. That's a conversation item, and that can certainly hit the report that comes forward as well. But I don't think it's something that we can report on as a function of net revenues and disbursements. We can only comment on what we got. That's my view on it, but again, because we just don't have the mechanisms in place at this time, and so to make that, to tie it to that, I think would be setting this policy up for a bit of roadblock. But that's just my view on it.
Yeah, the goals of the policy are about spending, basically supporting. Overnight stays, not necessarily increasing the income level. That's what it's separate.
It is, I appreciate
It's
that.
an important issue, but it's not. Yes, for sure.
My concern is that the next iteration is 4% isn't enough, so let's raise it to 6%.
Fair, but I think before that would ever happen, I think we would have to know that information. And be able to have that in front of council to know, like if we, or we would have to be, I call it like shrinking that. Gap, for lack of a better word, before that could even be proposed. I don't, that's certainly not on any radar I've heard since I've been at the city. As far as it being this fat fund being needing to be increased, because we know that there's that unmeasured piece that we haven't gotten fully under control. That helped.
I like the idea of putting it in the report though, because it'll bring it to council's attention.
It's just that I don't think we have a mechanism currently, if you know what that is.
We can say that, or we don't have a mechanism, there's a concept.
Yeah, fair, okay, I got it, sure.
I think that's a great place to. Sure seems like a way to fill up the coffers pretty inexpensively.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I we can certainly add some qualitative pieces to the report.
Run a scenario, the turnaround investment for the whatever extra headcount, bureaucracy, blah, blah, blah. How many more room nights do you need to capture?
Yeah.
Thanks.
So then back to the policy review, if I can, should we have some additional language in there then as every 5 years or as deemed appropriate. Like. 'Cause again, there could be things that come up after 1 year that we. Yeah. Just to.
I was actually thinking along the same lines, that is there any kind of reporting from the standing committee to council at the end of the year?
The standing committee was not captured in this draft.
No, I know.
But
We're building this as we're going. I think that would be an idea, that part of the cycle is here are the recommended projects, and here's how we did last year. Here's next year's recommended projects, so we how we did last.
I thought I was capturing that again under the corporate services reporting, but we were like, again.
Well,
inside
standing
out.
committee didn't exist from, you're right, I get that. So I'm saying now that we are proceeding with that. It seems appropriate to have a couple of touch points where here's where the standing committee will present its recommendations to council. Council makes the decisions. But here's the evaluation, here's the cycle of planning.
Which is 7 again. Everything that everybody's captured prior to this point that we wanted to back to, yeah. There's nothing saying yet.
No. So on 36 at the bottom, I think I just don't understand the sentence. Programs, projects, or initiatives that are considered part of the cities of Stratford's core business unrelated to tourism or economic development shall not receive funding.
That's good.
So again, we're trying to make sure that we're not using MAT funds for anything that we would already be moving. So the example that I give you is, say we have agreements with minor hockey for facility rentals or some other type of an arrangement. We don't want to be subsidizing things that the city's tax levy already does.
So no double dipping.
Okay.
That was the intent of that, but if there's any clarity, then I think it's okay, but.
Yeah. I don't know, I've been reading for a while now. Yeah. So on 37, ineligible expenses, salaries, wages for benefits, and I just again wanted to clarify, if I, as a part of my Gutter Chart Festival, have a world-renowned cellist come, their artist fees would not be considered salary, right?
You guys are the experts in the tourism field, but it's my understanding that that would be treated more like a per diem or something like a.
I just wanted to be clear on that.
It's really intended for, say, like it's the, so an organization that's putting it on, it's not for their staff.
Right, it's not for my staff, we're serving the Gutter Charts, okay.
Could we put that in, say, employee salary? Employees of the organization,
Sure, yeah,
because contractors,
but they're not even classified as salaries and wages when they're contractors, that is not, so yeah.
yes, that's, and,
Yeah.
I think that's. Right, wow, I feel like there was something else that said clarity. Oh, similarly, I think it's, there is a comment, there's one about accommodation. Did I see that? Sure I saw that. Did I see that?
Ineligible to me?
Yeah, I thought I did. Anyway, to, if that is somewhere that I'm missing right now, to clarify that, if I'm putting up that cellist. In,
I think that would classify as an operating expense of that event, that's.
right, okay.
I would interpret it, but, and I will say, actually, now that we're talking about salary wages, maybe it's already covered under IX.
yeah, regular
So
staff.
maybe I don't even need that, though.
You can put regular staffing expenses / salaries.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Nice, we made it through to the end.
Okay, sorry, throw that there, well, I just wanted to make sure that on the criteria piece, that if anybody had any further comments, again, I tried to beef up the sub criteria, which shows the benefit to the tourism industry, which is the only one that is on page 40. I'm not sure if I've captured it fully, so I'm hoping I haven't, that you guys will figure. It was not one comment with this one, so.
That was much clearer.
Was it? Okay. Okay, good, because again, I was tripping over several different conflicting comments through making these changes, so if you feel it's good, then it's okay. I do feel like this is one of those ones that, this is where this theoretical committee will be really helpful because, maybe I'm heavy on overnight accommodations and culinary, but I'm not sure about fusion to retail and cultural and the other ones. But it's gonna have such a big impact with overnights and restaurants that that committee can look at the full application and say, well, they only scored 5 on that. But there's enough value to that in itself. So you think that, so to that point, you think then the weighting's okay? Because like I was trying to figure out how to allocate those 10 points and try to figure. Like if it makes sense this way, so. This would be the committee, or does the applicant kind of answer? No, they wouldn't even really see this. This is more of a tool to guide the scoring or the evaluation committee. Yeah, so I don't know that I would even put, like, I think that the top part, so focusing on the impact to tourism without saying cultural experiences. Through the chair, I think the reason why I liked having that level of detail or those specific points is, again, wasn't approaching this with the standing committee in my mind. So if any other entity or any other individual was tasked with evaluating applications, this criteria would give them enough information and enough knowledge that to capture the intent of this committee and this policy. So, but if it doesn't, then I'm like, because I just want to make sure that this policy has a in the event that, say, council wants like one member of council to evaluate all the applications, or one person in the community to do it, whatever it looks like, not a standing committee specifically, that the policy can still stand up on its own. So that's why I was trying to do that, because there are other alternatives that council can look at for that. Well, I'm not discounting the value that the standing committee brings and has brought to this process. There could be like more like organizations that are already in place that apply this criteria and do as reasonable of a job. But again, like I'm happy to.
And it gives you the opportunity to mix and match across the different populations, and I believe they understand that there wasn't the notion of a standing committee formalized at that point. I think that they would be able to work with that, just as any other lesson, somebody who didn't go through the process would track what's going on. I thought it was. I would like to spend a minute whenever appropriate, because somebody was coming back to the standing committee and with the introduction of that notion, what key points need to be incorporated. So we talked about the composition, but the other idea is the recommendation, then making recommendations to council, and then at least annually presenting. It was part of the project recommendation that there will also be a moment of reflection, not that moment of reflection, the moment of reflection on performance. And the standing committee finally would be heavily involved in the final review.
And then, yeah, so I can add a section in the draft policy that talks about like under the roles and responsibilities.
standing committee, but I could also position it for council's benefit or other adjudicating body, right? But again, I'm trying not to influence them necessarily myself, but this is the committee's report, so we want to just leave it as standing committee.
Yeah, I think we were chatting earlier was this formation of a standing committee.
Yeah.
Use as much language as you think is appropriate from the ad hoc committee.
Yeah,
And all I was trying to do is, okay, what do you want these people to do? They evaluate ideas, they make recommendations,
yeah,
they evaluate performance, and they reevaluate the strategy.
yeah, okay, no, I follow that,
And
thank you.
if council wants to say, no, if there's a rent evaluation service out there that's more objective, we want to break, they can certainly.
Is there anything, and again, I know it's hard to separate it because of your views on the standing committee, but is there anything else in this policy that you think might not be understood by somebody other than, like, in the criteria piece? But that might not be understood if it wasn't at the table? Just so that we can try to refine those criteria, because again, and it might take some time. Maybe like another code.
It wasn't in the criteria so much, but we talked about where there's some language about, well, you have to follow the rules, but unless it seems otherwise, but I think we caught those.
I think so too,
I
but
feel it's better, but would be suggesting. I didn't have any.
No, I don't. I mean, I'm looking at it as someone with a lot of experience in this, so I think the better thing is to have someone who doesn't from this industry to look at it and say, I don't know what any of this means.
right,
Because I look at this and think I can get an application and be do and done. Whereas someone else might look at it.
I think it's through that chair, I think maybe what I'm good with the idea of inverting the standing committee now, should council veto that piece of the policy, then it would come back to staff to make sure that that is the case.
Right.
So that and then I might still need some expert opinions on that piece because. But again, well, we can see how that goes.
Well, just speaking as somebody does meet that criteria, if not a lot. I did read through it and it made sense to me. The only thing that I didn't like is because I didn't like that 7% at the end. I like a nice round number, but besides that, I was good. I understood the criteria. I'll take that back. And how it was defined. I just now it makes.
What do you have HST on Twitter?
Yeah. Totally.
I could get it up to like an even number, just fine.
Well, I was thinking you could dump in a couple more benefits to the industry and like that, but then it would be 13 there, which.
Or I could just go on that one, double, like I can double a couple.
Yeah, and well, the other thing, having sat on committees like this, and more for like bigger, like myself, these initiatives are all. When we get requests for, or we get trying to hire contractors. So we do some of the bigger contracts, like for instance, the construction, overseeing this construction address. So we have a similar system where we have numbers and we have to read through the criteria and understand. You know, so I learned a lot about construction, but I found myself, like there would be a section out of 5, and I would be forever going back and we had 4.2 or 3, but like I like to be able to drill down because I'm like, you know, if I have to stick with 4 out of 5, like all of it's the same. But I, you know, so sometimes I appreciate the nuances of being able to give, you know, more points without going to decimal points.
Right, so to that point, actually, for the benefit of this committee and anybody be watching. When we do that exercise of those evaluations, like whether it's a standing committee, whether it's an internal evaluation committee for anything for proposals or tenders. We do have, like, our standard process that we use for that, for internally is. We have, whether it's made up of 3, 5, 7 people, however many it is. And we, each person would do an individual evaluation, and then we would go and compile an average and determine how that falls out, and any outliers. say it's out of 10 and you give 10 and I give 1, right? Then we can talk about those, right? So we can kind of say, okay, what did you see that I might have missed or vice versa? And so I think that's where the value in a committee comes in to kind of say like, you know, so we don't end up with some distorted like outcome because of inadvertent.
Thank you, the word was candid, I was trying to think. Like, I don't know, anyway, but yes, like it stands for us to be drawing people from different, like your staff, council, so there are people that have different perspectives on it, like our perspective has to be, well, not on these bigger ones, we actually don't see the financial piece of it, we have to evaluate based on the structure of the organization and so on, but being able to drill down and have a few more numbers to work with, I always appreciate. But then I go around and I just watch it, that's what's that.
And so when I do take a stab at putting the standing committee piece in there, may articulate something along the lines of how that scoring would work. It's not necessarily that it needs to be prescribed, but it might be a little clearer for everybody that it's no one individual that sits on that standing committee or one member of staff. Like it's, while we kind of know that this is an acceptable practice for tenders, it might not be that obvious to others. So, okay, thanks.
I think you can capture that in the recommendation from the standing committee. The council should reflect the consensus view or an aligned view.
Yeah.
Maybe a consensus, it's almost
I know what we're looking for, but I can't.
aligned, plurality. Is there more content today?
I think that.
Yeah. So I think what happens next is we go through and modify it based on these recommendations. We also have a couple of members of our committee also need to weigh in on the changes that we're making. And then we were gonna also prepare the report that would go to council, and then we can review that.
Yes. So before we continue though, John, did you have other things you were gonna wanna bring up? No, okay, I thought you.
Believe it or not.
No, I said, when are we done? And then you were gonna want to.
I'm just getting coochie and.
No, it's all good.
Can you explain what that means that you just said, the report going to council?
So there'll be a report, like most of the time when we work on urban styles, they bring a report to council just outlining, you know, this is policy, this is what we went through, this is what the. You know, it's sort of giving
Staff.
council a chance, so staff would prepare that, but bring it here first before taking it to council.
Yes.
So that you can have a look at it and say, okay, this reflects, yes, what we did, or maybe you forgot this piece or whatever.
Sure. So is it typical to have an appendix or data table attached to a policy?
No, but it depends what you mean.
So I'm thinking about the survey,
Oh,
Right.
yeah, that would be attached to the report.
Yeah.
Not policy, but the report.
to report.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted, we agreed to this last meeting, I want to make sure that the survey that was done with accommodators is also part of that report.
Is that an attendant from a previous?
It is.
So it's in the minutes, and it was part of our discussion at the last meeting.
Okay.
Can we go to the minutes section of the slides then?
Excuse me, through the chair, Tatiana, the minutes for the ad hoc committees, they haven't yet been coming forward, is that correct? So we can include all of the committee minutes
Yeah, so
as part of this.
number 3 said, me requested the minutes be amended to include the results from the survey, small accommodators regarding it, so. That's the point I was making, and I'm reiterating it now, that I'd like the survey results to be part of the report. Both surveys.
So the survey that was issued, I'm not gonna say this the right way, so.
Yes, go ahead.
Is that it wasn't authorized by the committee at the committee level.
Nope, it was not sanctioned, so
So,
we can put that all over.
okay, that's the fine. Sorry.
Non-sanctioned, contraband,
Okay,
but.
I don't think there's that, I agree that there's some value there, I'm trying to be transparent and clear with council and what their objectives, so.
And the conversation that's in the minutes reflects talk, surely, so
Sure.
that there was. Equal.
And I have no problem with you being critical in the proper sense of the word, that this was not the work of the committee. It was done independently, it was not reviewed by the committee.
I would hope that this committee would provide me the same feedback when we get to the management report as well, because, you know, I don't want my influence to be too much either, because I've been trying to guide the process, but it's the committee's recommendation, so.
The only time I've ever felt that was in this one where it said something about, it's not part of this recommendation. I don't think that was you personally. I just think it's been a major linchpin that hasn't really, until today, broken through the noise of everything else. So the other follow-up I had was dividing the city's survey, if we can,
Let me see if I got a response.
into the target or non-target.
Okay, so the response I got back was we can, but whoever's completing the survey could have identified themselves as both a resident and an accommodation provider. So if we exclude the residents, then it may inadvertently exclude some accommodator responses to do that, because people could choose any of the above that apply to the further demographic. So I feel like yes, the answer is yes, but I'm not sure it's gonna accomplish what you're concerned about, but it would certainly exclude. So if a person made a comment that was a resident and an accommodator that said fix the roads and do like some of the stuff that we feel they don't understand, that's possible, it could have happened. So it could eliminate people that are accommodators that are also residents. Or we can do that and then see what it looks like.
Well, first question we usually ask on those ones is how many, pick 1, 2, 3. Is usually it's like 80% pick 1 and then tails and maybe.
Yeah, I'll see what I can pull out of that, but yeah, let's see if it's, so don't want it to distort the results the other way or the opposite direction in unintended example.
But you could just exclude them, right? Say the pure restaurateurs said this, the pure accommodators said this,
Sure.
and the muddled group, the mingled group, commingled group.
I think for me, it's not, because I think a lot of this was not surprising. I'm not so much concerned about what this says, because again, I don't think it's that far off of what we've done. My bigger concern is that this goes back to council and they say that didn't meet what what was asked.
I think I can address that in the report as well, though, and just kind of speak to the fact that the intent was, like the resolution was this, right? Survey was issued as that, right? And so there's.
Because it also, I mean, it doesn't say no residents are allowed to serve it. It just indicates that the focus should be there. So I just don't want to be here in well, we won't be here in October. I don't want to be here in September because that little resolution was not met. So maybe that's asking for feedback from some counselors. I don't know if you can do that.
Well,
I would see Stratford to be called out for something like this.
See what the data looks like.
And let's draft a report too, because I think we can kind of address it in like qualitative part that I expect people to think it's not.
So my thoughts around like pulling out the data from the survey, can we pull that one? If the person singularly just checked resident, then you pull those folks out.
Okay.
And anybody that's multiple, because a lot of this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Good point.
So that might be considered.
Everybody else meets the criteria.
Yeah, because you're resident plus something.
Right.
Unless you're up. We don't know what you are. We won't.
Here's my other
Okay, so we are on adjournment, we probably need to. Yes, but I don't know if there's suggestions from staff, if there's any thoughts on that. Or maybe sooner about.
Well, this is my week vacation, so after this, I'm like, and so you're welcome. I don't know if we have any things to work around.
And we also have 2 members missing, so
Mhm.
maybe this isn't the best time to decide, but suffice it to say, sometimes it would.
So roughly
Like to meet again.
3, 4, 5
Yeah,
weeks, that kind of thing, but 3, 4, 5 weeks.
like another, like a month now.
So the Mondays of 2027.
Is it better to just send it out?
It worked great to say here's
Yeah.
3 days, pick the ones that you can do. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Great, thank you everyone for
Thank you.
your participation today and
I tagged every person I knew
Yeah.
last week.
I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.